Good afternoon. I'm with Steve Balch, the CEO of Homeland Nickel. Homeland was featured on Goldfinger Capital all the way back in early 2025. I think it was around March of 2025. So we're definitely overdue for an update from Steve. Steve, how are you today?
I'm excellent, and thanks for having me back, Robert.
Yeah, well, I had to have you back. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on today, both in terms of the markets and also in the world. Number one, the Homeland share price shooting up big time here early in 2026. The price of nickel, it's a miracle. It's above $8 a pound. I felt like we spent the last year and a half at like $6.70. It was extremely painful. So there's a lot to get into, and we'll get into all of it. So first of all, Steve, tell us what's the update on the company and what's driving the share price move?
Sure. The last time we spoke, say last March 2025, so almost a year ago now, we were busy acquiring properties and keeping a pretty low profile. One thing that I learned at Canada Nickel as the VP Exploration and trying to acquire properties there, and we acquired over 22 properties, was that when you're acquiring properties and exploring and marketing at the same time, it makes it much more difficult to acquire properties. So we had our head down last year, did some very good deals. And then toward the end of the year, really in December, that's when we were wrapping things up, starting to get focused on exploration and marketing. And just in parallel, the price of nickel shot up. I think on December 16th or 17th, it's gone up by over $2 a pound. So the reason why our stock price is up, first of all, the price of nickel has gone up, and that's lifted all the nickel companies. Secondly, we've started our exploration and marketing campaign. So a lot of people who are on the sidelines watching the stock have jumped in. And thirdly, I think we're probably the best nickel story in the United States. We have more nickel than Talon Metals, for example. I think we have almost twice as much nickel as they do. Our nickel is sitting at surface. It would be very easy to mine it. We have over 60 million tons in a historical resource form. And I think people are realizing that if you really want to do something with nickel in America, we're the company, Homeland Nickel.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, a lot of that makes sense. There's not many ways to play, the metal of nickel in the U.S. You mentioned Talon. Obviously, that's a favorite here at Goldfinger Capital. There's a few other juniors, but they're explorers. They don't have a resource. I do want to talk about the comparison with Talon, with you first, but let's first dive into what Homeland has exactly. Tell us about how many properties the company has. And you mentioned 1 billion pounds of nickel. Does Cleopatra and $8 Mountain have an NI 43-101 resource estimate?
Okay, so let me start with our property position. We've now acquired 9 properties, about 17,000 acres, roughly 900 mining claims. They're all within about 75 kilometers of each other maximum in Southwest Oregon. They're all nickel laterite at surface. We've visited, I think, 5 of the 9 so far and have done some preliminary sampling. So we know that at least 5 of the 9 have nickel laterite at surface that we have found, but all 9 properties have historical nickel laterite lenses delineated by others, including the USGS going back to the 1970s. So our 2 main properties, Cleopatra and Red Flat. Cleopatra has almost 40 million tons of 0.93% nickel, and Red Flat has almost 19 million tons of 0.84% nickel. Those are both historical resources. They're not 43-101 compliant, although they were done to the to the standard of the NI 43-101 format, but they were never published. So because they were never published, we can't say that it's 43-101. And that's part of our 2026 exploration mandate, is to update those two resources into a formal standard. And so if you add up the nickel on those two properties, yes, we have over 1 billion pounds of nickel, which is roughly twice the amount of nickel that Talon Metals has. Talon Metals is a very good story on its own. I mean, they have very high grade nickel, I think 2.13% nickel equivalent, but it's an underground operation. Ours is at surface. And I'm happy to talk about a comparison with Talon, because I believe they're the only other real nickel story in the U.S.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about that, because I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between sulfide and laterite, right? And so most of the, nickel deposits and projects in the world today are sulfide, but obviously since 2022, the laterite in Indonesia has been the main force in the global market that's been driving down the price. The Chinese miners in Indonesia mining the laterite there. Why don't you tell us about the comparison between a sulfide deposit and a laterite deposit?
Sure. So I mean, looking specifically at Talon, it's a high grade nickel sulfide deposit. So the nickel is in a sulfide format, mostly pentlandite, which is a mineral, a nickel bearing mineral, nickel and iron bearing sulfide. And it usually happens when you have an ultramafic intrusion. There's a lot of fluid flow, and where that fluid slows down, the heavier elements like nickel sulfide drop out, and they pool, forming these high-grade lenses. And I think at Tamarack, they have 8 separate zones, which total about 17 million tons. And it's divided loosely into a high-grade zone, which is about 8.5 million tons, and a lower grade zone of 0.84, I think, 0.83 or 0.84% nickel, which is a lower grade zone. So half of the resource at Tamarack is the same grade as our material. Nickel laterite is not bound to sulfur. It's a weathering product from ultramafic rocks, usually dunites and periddotites. And so, the intrusion that we have staked is about 170 million years old. It was eroded, exposed at surface, and then the periodotite and dunite began eroding. And as the erosion took place, it concentrated the nickel, the iron, magnesium, and so on in place. So now we have grades typically at surface of greater than 0.4 nickel. You get a few feet down and you're up to 1% nickel. And as you go deeper, you can get into the 1.5 and sometimes up to 2% nickel. So it's a weathering product that is the laterite, whereas nickel sulfide is part of an intrusion.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit for Talon. We'll go back and forth, but I'm a fan of both companies and obviously a shareholder of Homeland as well. So the lower grade is 0.83%, but there's also copper, cobalt, platinum group, metals. There's even some gold, and so the total equivalent grade for the lower grade inferred at Tamarack is 1.19%. So that's one important point to make there. Good point that the laterite in Oregon is at surface, so this could be mined, in an open pit setting. It's basically, like a big trucks, big shovels. You don't have to go underground. And normally, when it's underground mining, it's going to be a smaller mining operation, whereas an open pit could be potentially very large tonnage being moved. What about the processing? So at Tamarack, they're going to have to ship this to a mill by rail for processing into a concentrate, and then it's going to have to probably go to a smelter in Canada unless we build a smelter here in the U.S., which is actually a possibility here now. What happens to the laterite?
Right. So just for the record, I'm a big fan of Talon Metals too. For the nickel laterite, I wouldn't call it an open pit because it's not really a pit. It's like just digging soil up at surface. So the first 20 to 40 feet of the soil and boulders would be removed. There's no blasting. It would be similar to a gravel pit more than a traditional open pit mining operation. So you would remove the material. Once it's in a truck, you can really ship it anywhere because all of these 9 deposits are a maximum distance of 75 kilometers away. You could have a central processing facility where you would drop the ore and then run it through some kind of concentrator. I know Talon will ship to, I think it's called the Humboldt mill. Yeah. And they'll probably use a flotation circuit. So they'll grind the material, float it, produce a concentrate, and then do something with the concentrate, which will probably be anywhere from 14 to 20% nickel. And what we would do is it would be one of two procedures. We could have a traditional smelter where we just throw this stuff in, melt it all down, and separate the nickel. That's what was originally done at the Riddle mine, which is about 100 kilometers to the north. That's America's largest nickel mine. 50 million tons of 1.5% was mined over a period of, say, 40 years. They had a traditional smelter. We could do a similar thing, have a traditional smelter, and then ship a nickel matte to some processing facility or build a refinery in Oregon and produce battery metal or stainless steel or something like that, or nickel for stainless steel, not stainless steel necessarily. Or we could process using sulfuric acid leach at atmospheric pressure. So you dump this stuff inside a closed system into a big pile, and you pour sulfuric acid and you leach the nickel out, and you keep adding acid, and you probably move the material around a bit until you reach your 80 to 90% recovery, and then you repeat the process with fresh ore. That's a much cheaper capital cost than having a smelter, but the smelter you could achieve up to they were reporting up to 95% recovery at the Riddle mine, and that's old technology. So high recoveries for us. Either with a traditional smelter or sulfuric acid. And we would be flexible where we wanted to put that, say within 75 kilometers of any of the mines. Now, if we didn't want to process in the state of Oregon, we could ship the material, say, over to Nevada, process the material there, where it would be very close to a Tesla car plant. So the raw material would go in, and nickel batteries could come out the other side and go into a Tesla plant. A lot of flexibility. We could also ship to the coast, ship raw ore overseas, and make money. But I'm not sure that really meets with the mandate of a domestic American supply of nickel.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, if this is going to work, if these Oregon deposits are going to move into being permitted and being operating mines, I would say it's got to be done in the U.S. or at the very least in North America. But why not in the U.S., right? Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So yeah, going back to Talon, so they actually have two processing centers. They have one north Dakota that they're building, and then they have the Humboldt mill in Michigan, which is already built and operating the ore from the mine that's there that they just acquired. Yeah, so they've got a couple options there, and they haven't actually stated emphatically where they will send probably to the other one, the one they're building in North Dakota. But I'm pretty sure that these things are fluid and they can change as things are permitted and get built. Okay, so going back to Oregon, you've been assembling this property package for the last couple of years. Seems like you've got a lot of ground, you've got a lot of resources. You have, as you said, 39.5 million tons of 0.93% just in the one property. Obviously, it would be nice to confirm that with some modern, drill holes that it doesn't have to go deep. I mean, this is like within 20 meters of surface. What are the plans to do that? Just put 20 or 30 holes in there to get confirmation that it's still there, and then put out, an updated, resource.
Yeah, so let's look at Cleopatra, for example. It has been subjected to a modern exploration plan. So the work was done in 2007 to 2009. Interestingly, that's the same time period when Talon Metals discovered high grade on their deposit. So that work has all been done. We have all of the assay certificates and the assay results. It's just that we didn't publish it, therefore we can't say it's a 43-101 report. But we can go back in and reproduce roughly 10 to 15% of that work, which is part of our 2026 program. And then we can use that historical data in conjunction with the new data to produce an updated resource. And that's one of our key metrics for this year, is to get that completed, both at Cleopatra and also at Red Flat. So we'll have 60 million tons of 0.9 nickel in a NI 43-101 format, hopefully by the end of 2026. Then in 2027, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, I was going to ask you, like, what needs to happen this year to have that happen, to have the ability to publish that and say we have a 43-101 on these two properties.
Yeah, so we operate within the Siskiyou National Forest, and that's overseen by the Forest Service. So if we want to go into the forest and take some surface samples, we can do that, and we don't have to notify anyone. But if we want to dig down, let's say more than 2 or 3 feet, and we want to go down to, say, 20 to 24 feet, we have to get permission from the Forest Service by submitting to them a plan of operation, which we have done both for Cleopatra and Red Flat. And in that plan of operation, there are 2 components. The first component is the surface use determination. They look at what we're doing and they say, okay, that's suitable for a forest, go ahead. And we have approval at Red Flat, and we should have approval very soon at Cleopatra. The second part is what's called a NEMA evaluation. It's an environmental review, and we're going for what's called a categorical exclusion on that. What that means is that you have to inform the public of your intentions. They get a certain time period to make their issues known to you, and then the Forest Service will respond to that. But in the Forest Service opinion, there's nothing that we're doing that should prohibit us from going in. And that review is now underway, and we're hoping to get permission early May so that we can do a spring, summer, and fall program. We feel we need 2 to 3 property in order to collect enough data to be able to bring in that historical resource into a modern mineral resource estimate. And that's where we are.
Okay. That sounds very encouraging. So you would get a CatEx on these 2 flagship properties?
Yeah, that's our intention, and that we're pretty confident that's going to happen, but it's a process you have to go through.
Okay, but you've been having an ongoing dialogue with the Forest Service, and so far it's positive.
It's all been very positive. They have to, go through their procedures, and they have to do certain things. It takes a certain amount of time. They're also very understaffed, and they don't have a lot of people who have a background in mineral exploration. They're forest people. So it's some of the things that they need to do. They're understaffed to be able to do it. But we're hoping for a May-ish approval, and so is the Forest Service. I mean, they're working very hard, and we're one of their priority projects.
Okay, very good. And just to be clear, what's the total size of the properties you have in Oregon, and the total number of acres of the mining claims?
In total, we have just over 17,000 acres. I think we're approaching 900 mining claims. And I can't promise you that every single claim is over top of nickel laterite, but at Red Flat and Cleopatra in particular, the claims were pared back to cover just the laterite. So all those claims, and I think there's 140 on one and maybe 70 or 80 on the other, all those claims have nickel laterite on them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty well known. I mean, like you said, the state of Oregon has a history of mining, and the Riddle mine, or the Hannah mine, I know there's a couple names for it, was operating from, I think, just around World War II or shortly after till the 90s. So I mean, this is pretty well known. We're not really guessing here, like it's not the same as drilling a 1,000-meter hole at a blind like chargeability anomaly or something crazy like that, right? Okay, so I guess.
Well, and let me just interrupt you there, if I can, Robert. So the Hannah Mining Company, they owned the Riddle mine. They went in the 1970s. They went all around Southern Oregon looking for other potential areas to mine. And so these properties that we've acquired, like Peavine Mountain, $8 Mountain, Woodcock Mountain, Josephine Creek, Rough and Ready, those were explored by the Hannah Mining Company, also Inspiration Mining, with the USGS going in behind them and getting access to some of the data, not all of it, but some of the data. So a lot of this data is in the public domain. Some of these properties were privately owned. And so when we acquired the property from the owner, we got access to a lot of historical data that is not in the public domain. But most of our staking was based on publicly available information, and most of it was published by the USGS. You just have to be able to dig for it.
Yeah. Getting data in the US is a little different than in countries like Canada, where it's very public, it's very available. In the US, you have to usually buy it, or you have to obtain it from an old mining company somehow. It's usually pay for it. Okay, so got that. So tell us about some of the other RAB Capital, what's happening with the agreement there. I know there was some news out on that in the last few months.
Yeah, so with RAB Capital, we did the original deal with them on Cleopatra and Red Flat, and we also had an agreement with them that any other properties we staked in Oregon, they would have a 2% NSR on. So all our properties have a 2% NSR payable to RAB Capital with a 1% buy down. I think the buy down price is $2 million. We also have milestone payments to them. Publish an updated resource, there's a cash payment. If we do a pre-feasibility or a preliminary economic assessment, there's a payment. If we do a feasibility study, there's a payment. And if we go into commercial production, there's a payment. And those payments total $15 million. So that was the deal with RAB. We also issued them 20 million shares of Homeland Nickel. I think as part of the action in our share trading over the past 2 weeks, they may have parted with some of those shares, and we would have found a good home for them. I think we know roughly where 80 to 85% of our stock is sitting. So that's RAB Capital. And when we did a deal with Patriot Nickel, this is a more recent deal. So they are optioning 2 of our properties, Cleopatra and $8 Mountain. And in return, they are giving us cash payments totaling $1.25 million US. They've already made the first $500,000 US payment. They have $3 million in exploration commitments, and they have to bring at least one of those 2 properties to a pre-feasibility stage before they can earn an 80% interest in the property, and we'll retain a 20% interest, and we'll fund exploration going forward 80-20. Plus, they're going to issue us 20% of their shares, of their common shares, just prior to an IPO, and they're planning on listing on a U.S. exchange, either, say, the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. And part of the reason for doing the deal with Patriot Nickel was it's a U.S. story, we feel, needing more U.S. shareholders, and also we need some influential people in the U.S. who can help kind of get through some of these permitting bottlenecks that a lot of the companies are having in jurisdictions which aren't super mining friendly or just don't have a recent history of mining. As you said, the last mine in Oregon shut down in the 1990s. So no one who works for the Forest Service or the Department of Geology in Oregon has ever seen an Oregon mine in production.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, I mean, all the guys from the 1980s and early 90s are either retired or dead. Yeah, that's the sad reality of it. So, who is Patriot Nickel? Like, I've never heard of Patriot. It's a U.S. company. It's a Delaware company, private company. I mean, you're sort of making me think by what you said that Patriot has some good lobbyists in Washington.
Yeah, it will have people who have good contacts inside the government, but also good financial contacts, so that, and I don't want to tell the story too much of Patriot Nickel. We agreed with the people who founded the company that they would be given the opportunity to tell the story from their side, and they're just putting their team in place. So you won't get too many details on Patriot Nickel from me today, but rest assured that the people who will be in Patriot Nickel will have very good contacts with both the government and financing groups in the U.S.
Okay. And is there a special reason why they chose those 2 projects to acquire from Homeland? Is there any possibility that they could acquire more?
So they do have a first right of refusal if we were to try and sell one of our other properties to a third party, which we would never do. We're going to hold on to them, but so they do have that ROFR. Why those 2 properties? So nobody knows the properties better than myself. So when we sat down, Patriot Nickel said, look, you got to give us something really good. And Cleopatra is, without a doubt, our best property. 40 million tons already, and it's only been explored to a depth of 12 feet below surface. So that project is going to get much larger. It's also in a more environmentally sensitive area, although it's nowhere near the Smith River drainage basin. Somehow it was roped in to be included in that with the original withdrawal order, which we're not too happy with. So we'll be addressing that as well. But Cleopatra is definitely, I think, our best project. And then $8 Mountain is a project that lies outside of withdrawal area. I had visited it personally, so I felt comfortable, optioning a property to someone that had good nickel laterite on it, and I just wanted to make sure they got off on a good start. So we gave them 2 very good properties. Now, of the other properties that we retain, first of all, Red Flat. We visited Red Flat. We took 2 of our largest shareholder groups. Satu Raman is one such fellow. Robert Hirschberg is another person. We invited them to come to Red Flat. We drove across the entire property. We walked into the trenches. They were astounded at the amount of nickel laterite that's sitting at surface and how obvious it is. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's everywhere. And of course, Dr. Setu Raman has seen nickel laterites before, so he knew exactly where to look. And he was surprised at how clean the laterite was. So these other properties, Josephine Creek, Woodcock Mountain, my geologist has been on those, sampled them both. Woodcock Mountain has historic resources of nickel laterite up to 2%. I have all that data. I'm just going through it now. Peavine Mountain, we staked. There's nickel laterite lenses there. Iron Mountain, again, the same thing. So there's nickel laterite on every project that we have. We just don't know the extent to which. And that's part of our 2026 program, is to get on each mining claim and evaluate it. Is there nickel laterite under this? And if so, what's the quality of it? And then eventually, what is the thickness of it? And we'll be able to put a resource together on all 9 projects.
Okay, very good. Couple more questions, Steve. I mean, your share price has done really well. I mean, normally when junior mining companies see a jump in share price like this, they look to finance and take advantage of it. What are the company's capital needs? How much cash do you have, and do you think you'll finance soon?
Yeah, so we don't need to finance. I was just summarizing how much cash and securities we have with that $500,000 USD from Patriot Nickel. I think we have about $1 million Canadian in cash right now. A couple $1 million worth of Noble, $1 million of Benton, $500,000 of Magneterra, over $1 million of Canada Nickel. That's over $5 million in cash and securities. We don't have to finance. Plus, we have a 30% interest in the Great Burnt and South Pond. That's owned by Benton. The 70% interest is owned by Benton, and they have a market cap of $25 million. That's the only project they really have. So if we valued Great Burnt at, say, 10% of Benton, that's over $3 million there too. So we could sell that interest if we wanted to raise more money for our projects in Oregon. So no, we don't need to finance. Would we finance? I think we would only finance if we needed to really accelerate our projects. If, for example, the Forest Service completely melted down and gave us access to drilling all our projects at once, maybe we might want to become more aggressive in our exploration program and do a financing. But we don't need to finance, and I don't think we will finance.
Okay, very good answer. And not necessarily the answer I was expecting. Yeah, but with all the shares of those publicly traded companies, it does put you in a nice a spot where you don't have to move fast on anything. Going back to the Patriot, I mean, look, you said that they want to be able to properly do an introduction of themselves and put out their own news flow. But can you give us some idea of what sort of timeline we might be looking at here in terms of learning more about Patriot and what some of their plans are?
Yeah, so they've selected a chairman, a very impressive guy, and he'll be putting a board together. They're doing a CEO search right now. They've also already put me in touch with a gentleman who has very good contacts in the permitting areas. So he has 1 foot in permitting and 1 foot in the industry. We had a conversation the other day about a good plan to move forward, and he had some great ideas and some great contacts that we're working through. In terms of timing, I would say probably sometime in the next 3 months, you'll see a major update on their website. They have a PowerPoint presentation that's floating around that I've seen that's quite excellent, but it features a lot of material that we provided. So it's not new news to me, but it will be to potential shareholders of Patriot. So I think probably another 2 to 3 months, and then they should get rolling. They want us to be in the field this summer exploring on the JV ground. So they'll have to be up and running before then.
Very good. So to try to help investors grasp what the potential value could be here, can you tell us some key catalysts that could help to really demonstrate that these assets in Oregon are worth a lot more than they have been valued at in the past, or even the market is valuing them now?
Right. So again, I use Talon Metals as an example. I mean, they have 500 million pounds of nickel, and they're trading at a market cap of 720 million. We have twice as much nickel, and we're trading at 1/10 the market cap. So I think just people grasping the amount of resource that we already have is going to be a huge catalyst for increasing our share price. I think the big thing that will kind of solidify what we're doing is when we restate the resources in a 43-101 format. I think that people can appreciate the fact that all the work was done to that standard, but until you have a report that you can hold in your hand and wave it in front of people, they just won't believe it. And so that's going to be the first thing, and that's going to happen this year in 2026. Then we move on to a pre-feasibility study where we can talk about more complicated things. How would we mine? Where would we process? These kinds of things. Where would we get water from? Permitting, all this kind of stuff. And all our projects are, I like to call them pretty clean. So we don't have any First Nations issues. We don't have any rare birds. They tend to be on the top of mountains where there's less forest. And in some cases where there is forest, there have been major forest fires. So there's not a lot of marketable timber and so on. There are rare plants in Southern Oregon, and I know people are very sensitive to rare plants. And of course, if you're going to mine the surface, you have to remove the vegetation. When we were at Red Flat, I was surprised that they're clear-cut logging adjacent to our property. So you can clear-cut log in Southern Oregon, but you can't remove a rare plant near a mining operation. So I think that's going to have to change. And then in 2027 is when we're planning our pre-feasibility study, and that's when all these things start to get filled in. We're also doing other things, like we're reaching out to the rare plant people because most of the rare plants that have been brought to our attention aren't anywhere near our mining claims. So people are fearful without the need of being fearful. There are some rare plants. There's a daisy, I can't remember the name of it, that's at Flycatcher Springs near Red Flat, but it's in an area that's already been removed from staking. It was removed in 1962. We staked, I think, in 2007. So we wouldn't have the right to mine in that area anyway. And of course, we're not in the business of mining rare plants.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Plus water, we've reached out to some water people. There's very high quality water in Southern Oregon, and a lot of it drains down into California, but some of it drains out into the West Coast in Oregon, and there's fish species and there's recreational fishing. we wouldn't be mining near rivers. We're up on top of the mountains. We're not down in the valleys where the rivers are, so we wouldn't impact them. And also, some of the rivers do have, like, they go right through nickel laterite. It's the lower grade material. We would never mine it anyway. But you know, these pristine rivers run through nickel laterite, and they remain pristine because nickel is a very inert metal. It doesn't dissolve easily in water. And so what makes these rivers pristine now would keep them pristine even when we're up and running with the mine.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, that being able to publish the resources for those two projects and say this is compliant with 43 101, that's a big catalyst. And obviously any positive momentum on the permitting front, drilling, et cetera, could be an extremely positive catalyst. And just I just want to pick your brain for a second with Talon. So yeah, the market cap, let's say around 700 million or so in Canada. But would you say that that's actually a fair valuation at this point? Because Talon is actually a miner now. They actually own an operating permitted mine in Michigan, and Tamarack is a really exceptional high grade project that has been already demonstrated to have support from the federal government under both Biden and Trump. Would you say that's a fair valuation, actually?
Yeah, I might even argue it's a little undervalued. I when I'm comparing Homeland to Talon, of course, I'm trying to talk my book, as they say. But if you just look at the Talon's deposit, they have 17 million tons. Over half of that is greater than 2% nickel. That's high grade material. The lenses are all more or less in the same location, so you could access them all from a single shaft just by drifting out. So I don't really, and it's a traditional nickel sulfide operation, which is really well understood. So I think that's a pretty good valuation. I don't think they're seriously undervalued. I think there's upside to Talon Metals now that 100% interest, and they have some processing infrastructure, and they have interest from the Tesla and also the federal government. 17 million tons. If they were to mine 1 million, 17 years, that's a pretty good mine life. I have a philosophy that if you can mine something out faster than you can permit it, then it's probably not going to be brought into production. And it seems to take about 10 to 15 years to bring a mine in production. So Talon's on the safe side of that. Plus, they have good upside potential. It seems that as they drill deeper, they're hitting better material, higher grade. And a lot of times you get to a certain depth, and I think they're getting there now, where it doesn't make sense to drill from surface. They need to get underground and start doing exploration from underground. And that takes a little bit more time. So I think Talon Metals has a very good project in front of them.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, the vault zone, as you said, they're hitting higher grades at depth in some new areas. So yeah, I'm very bullish on Talon. I think there is a lot of upside, and I'm bullish on
let
Homeland.
me talk about let me talk about the vault zone for a second, because they're drilling 700 meters from surface. And those are expensive holes, and you don't know exactly where they're going. It would make a lot more sense for them to wait until they go underground. But the intervals they're hitting and the grades are phenomenal. So, I mean, it's got some really good upside. The thing about Homeland, when we drill our little 24-foot auger holes, I mean, you could drill 20 auger holes for the price of a single hole that's going into the vault zone. And the time that it takes, that we generated those two resources of 60 million tons in 2 years. And so to generate a resource for a nickel laterite, it's 10 times faster than what it would take to generate a resource at the depths that they're now approaching. So we have time on our side, and they have grade on their side. They have some pretty spectacular grade.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, that's kind of like your bogey. You're like, if things go according to plan and we advance these projects and get some positive momentum on the permitting front over the next couple of years, we could be a 10x in terms of market cap. Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I want to ask you one more question about all these executive orders from the Trump administration, and obviously they are going all out on metals in 2026, and David Copley, who's the top mining guy basically in the White House, went to Saudi Arabia and gave a speech where he basically said, we're supporting our mining companies, we're streamlining the environmental impact statements, and just it was a very positive presentation for the mining sector. Do you think that we're actually going to be building some smelters and more refineries and different kinds of processing sort of infrastructure here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, there's a load of questions in there, but yeah, I think that definitely the U.S. is going to have to build its own infrastructure, not just having mines. When you were talking about the executive orders and the Trump administration and so on, I remembered we got in there during the Biden administration, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris said, we need more mines. And, they were talking about critical minerals, and nickel is one of them. The Chinese are basically control most of the metal markets now, over 70% of the nickel market, and Russia is also a big supplier. So the U.S. needs its own nickel supply. It doesn't have to be self-sustaining, although with what we have, I think they could be. But if you're negotiating with Canada and you don't have any nickel, you basically need Canada's nickel. Whereas if you have your own nickel, well, maybe you'll take some Canadian stainless steel if the price is right. You have more flexibility. And I think the U.S. needs both mines and mine infrastructure like smelters and refineries so that it has more negotiating power. And that seems to be what America is looking for right now, is being able to better negotiate with other countries. Not so much in the metals area, but in other strategic areas like, safety, the military, NATO, and all these things. The U.S. is having to basically drag all these companies forward. It would be great if America was more self-sustained.
Steve Balch, thank you very much for your time. This is a fantastic conversation.
Thanks, Robert. And if we wait a year, we might have that 10 times market.
All right, we'll do it again in 8 months.
That sounds great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Cheers.